spies were right, General. The Jedi have positioned a fleet beyond the planetary rings.
The Rebel Alliance used a wide variety of ships in their fight against the Empire, but there are a lot of ships that they should have been able to get, but never bothered to use. While some would have been difficult to pry out of the Empire's hands, others, from separatist warships to popular commercial freighters, just seemingly flew under their radar. So today we're going to look at some of the ships they should have used. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and these are the 5 best ships for Rebels. Gozanti Cruiser. First up is a ship whose absence from the Rebel fleet genuinely baffles me. The Gozanti Cruiser is nearly ubiquitous in the Imperial Navy, being one of their most versatile vehicles, but didn't seem to be utilized by the Rebellion in any capacity. The Empire used them as a light warship, freighter, carrier, electronic warfare vessel, and landing craft. The Separatists used them as a freighter and picket ship. The Black Sun Crime Syndicate used them as a frigate, but the Rebels didn't seem to use them at all. And it's not like they would have been hard to get. We see the Ghost crew steal at least one from the Empire and use it for a single mission, and it was an incredibly popular, commercially available starship, so I don't really know why they were sleeping on these. I feel like I talk about the Gozanti in like every other list video, and the reasons and ways it could fit into the Rebel fleet are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it here. It's just a really good, very customizable, easily acquired multi-role starship that the Rebel Alliance was really missing out on. Corona-class armed frigate. One of the more rare and unusual warships of the Star Wars galaxy is the Corona-class armed frigate, and I think it would have been quite useful to the Rebel Alliance. The Corona is most famous for its use by Hondo Ohnaka and his pirate gang. While the Rebels had very different needs and capabilities than the pirates, the Corona would still be a good fit for them. It was quite large, with a diameter of 376 meters and a height of about 75 meters, and very well armed. It carried 2 medium turbolaser batteries, 4 heavy ion cannons, 4 point defense medium laser cannon batteries, a tractor beam projector, and 2 missile launchers. It could also carry 6 Flare Star class attack shuttles and 12 WLO-5 speeder tanks, or presumably whatever other starfighters and tanks were available to the Rebels. Despite its size and capabilities, it only required 64 crew, and it could carry 200 passengers and 450 tons of cargo. The Rebel Alliance didn't typically engage in a lot of ground combat, but the Corona would be a great ship for landing troops, ground vehicles, and equipment for the occasions where they did. It could clear a landing zone with its weapons, land and deploy its troops, then take off again and defend them from orbit. However, there are a couple of issues I can foresee. One is that it is such an unusual design that maintenance costs and time could be prohibitive. The Rebels had a lot more resources and money than Hondo's pirates, so that may not be a problem, but Hondo may have been willing to invest a higher percentage of his resources into this ship than the Rebels would be due to its distinctive appearance. Hondo chose this model of ship for vanity purposes, a luxury that the Rebellion didn't have the time and money for. The other problem is that it is a rather rare and old ship, and most of them are in the hands of collectors who are unlikely to donate them to the Rebel cause. The Corona was originally a proposed droid transport design for the Separatists, but the CIS wasn't impressed with it, and Heor Chal had to cancel production and sold the few that were built on the open market. It wouldn't be impossible for the Rebels to pick up a few, but it would be more likely and practical for them to convince some Corona owners like Hondo to join the Rebellion than to find some to buy outright. Its 3.7 million credit price tag may have been prohibitive as well. Also, regarding the name, Corona-class armed frigate? Do Heor-Chal Engineering think frigates are normally unarmed? As far as I know, frigate has always been a military classification in real life and in Star Wars, so it seems redundant to specify that a frigate is armed. Even Star Wars' so-called medical frigates are at least lightly armed. Oh well, not important. Cumulus-class Corsair. Now, we don't actually see one of these in action until a few years after the end of the Galactic Civil War, so technically we can't say for sure whether or not it would have been on the market in time for the rebels to make use of them, but I doubt that even Captain Gorian Shard of the Pirate Nation would be using a brand new ship, so it was probably around for a while. And the Cumulus-class Corsair would have made a great light carrier for the Rebel Alliance. It measured roughly 150 meters long by 68 meters wide and 28 meters tall, and had a large open-topped hangar bay that could fit 10 pirate snub fighters, or probably around the same number of A-wings or fewer larger fighters. The design of the hangar would also mean that it could take in ships that would normally need a much larger ship to land in, such as most shuttles or rebel freighters like the Ghost or Millennium Falcon. Usually those would be too tall or wide to land in smaller ships with a fighter capacity, like the Pelta-class Phoenix Home, and would need to go to a ground base or Mon Calamari cruiser if they needed to land to make repairs, so having a small ship with a big enough hangar for them would be a tremendous boon. Actually, the open-topped design makes me think that it could be useful for transporting snowspeeders or other atmospheric fighters too. They could launch and recover them very easily in atmosphere this way. I guess any other hangar design would work perfectly fine in the air, but I feel like that's something this design would be good for. The Cumulus could also defend itself fairly well with 4 quad laser turrets and 14 ventral gunwales, plus its blade-like bow would probably do some serious damage to an Imperial ship as a last resort. It wasn't the most durable ship on the market, being defeated relatively easily by a Mandalorian Gauntlet and a modified Naboo N1, but in a fleet escorted by other Rebel warships and carrying more capable starfighters, it should be just fine. For the rest of its stats, I would guess a top speed of 800 km per hour, a Class 1 or 2 hyperdrive, a crew of 50 to 60, and at least 10 passengers. It likely had a sizable cargo capacity to haul stolen credits for the Pirate Nation or Rebel equipment for the Alliance, and should have cost probably 500 to 750,000 credits. B84 Viper. Another somewhat uncommon ship that I think would fit well into the Rebel fleet is the B84 Viper. We know very little about this ship, but it was used by several crime syndicates and pirate groups during the Galactic Civil War, so it likely would have served the Rebellion quite well. It was very similar to the Pelta, DP-20, and CR-90s that the Rebels made great use of, so they would have probably liked the Viper quite a lot. It measured about 185 meters long by 58 wide and 38 tall, and was armed with 6 laser cannons and 2 missile launchers. Like many of the other ships on this list, it could carry starfighters as well. It had a large hangar running through the center of the ship that could hold at least 4 rogue-class gunships, or 8 A-wings by my estimation, or several of any other Rebel starfighter. In this way, it is sort of like a more capable version of the Cumulus Corsair, a hybrid carrier-cruiser type of ship. It probably required more crew and resources to operate it, but considering how popular similar ships were within the Rebel Alliance, it would have been well worth the effort. Speaking of which, I expect it would have probably required around 50 to 100 crew, and carried a similar quantity of passengers, as well as a couple hundred tons of cargo. It likely cost about 1.5 million credits. Of all the ships on this list, this one is the best visual match for the Rebel fleet by far. They probably aren't too concerned about the consistent aesthetics of their navy, but you can't deny that this one would look right at home between a Hammerhead corvette and a Nebulon B. Munificent-class Star Frigate. There are a lot of Separatist ships that could be very useful to the Rebellion. In fact, all of them would be, but I think the most practical would be the Munificent-class star frigate. The Recusant-class destroyer was fully automated, which could be useful given the Rebellion's smaller size, but I have to imagine that system would rely on CIS servers and software that may not be available after the Empire nationalized and took over the CIS. Or worse, the software could be stored on the ships themselves, and because of the Imperial takeover of the Commerce Guild, Imperial slicers could just hijack rebel recusants. The Providence-class dreadnought would be a safer option, and a more capable ship overall, but I think it would be too similar to the various Mon Calamari ships the Rebellion already has to make an interesting entry on this list. Plus, the Providence was built by the Quarrens, which might cause some uncomfortable tension with the Mon Calamari in the Rebel Alliance, as they were responsible for the Separatist invasion of the two species' shared planet. A Lucrehulk would be the ultimate find for the Rebellion, but I expect the Empire would make that powerful of a battleship a priority target for scrapping, and it would be difficult to find one. Plus, it would also be extremely difficult for the Rebellion to support such a large, complex, and crew and resource-intensive ship, and irresponsible to tie up so many resources in one place. The Rebellion did actually manage to get their hands on one Lucrehulk, which they used for starfighter pilot training due to its enormous hangars. It wouldn't really have been a practical choice for frontline combat for them. So that leaves us with the Munificent, and I think that would fit quite nicely into the Rebel fleet. For starters, it was a nice medium size that they had almost no ships in. It measured 825 meters long by 426 meters wide and 243 tall, filling the gap between things like the Nebulon B and the Mon Calamari cruisers. It was partially automated and controlled by a droid brain, but not to the degree that the Recusant was, and it seems like it should have had enough crew to protect it from the kind of interference the Recusant would have been susceptible to. Not to mention, the Banking Clan appeared to enjoy a greater degree of independence from the Empire than the Commerce Guild did, so the Empire may not have had as easy access to the Munificent's source code, combat algorithms, etc. This is all to say that the Munificent was automated enough to be a very easy ship to staff and utilize, but not so much that it would be a cybersecurity risk. Which would be a fantastic segue into a VPN ad read, but I won't subject you to that today. The Munificent class required a crew of 200 battle droids. I'm not sure if that would translate to more or less organics, but we'll assume it would be around the same number. It had a maximum atmospheric speed of 950 km per hour and a Class 1 hyperdrive. It could carry 150,000 battle droids and 10,000 tons of cargo. I doubt the Rebellion would want to use battle droids in that large of a capacity, or be able to secure that many, so the space dedicated to those could probably house 10 to 50,000 organic troopers, or just be converted to additional cargo. The ship could also carry 48 Vulture droids, but if I'm not mistaken, these are carried externally, so it would be very hard to convert this to standard Rebel starfighter capacity. And I also doubt they would be too interested in Vulture droids either. So a Rebel Munificent may not have had much of a starfighter capacity at all. Fortunately, it makes up for this loss with its incredible firepower. It was armed with several ordnance launchers, 40 retractable light twin turbolaser turrets, 12 medium flak cannons for point defense, 20 single light turbolaser turrets, 26 twin light fixed turbolasers, 2 heavy ion cannons, and the star of the show, 2 bow-mounted heavy turbolaser cannons. These were capable of destroying an ice moon 1,000 kilometers in diameter or piercing the shields of a 10-kilometer wide Grade 3 battle station. Not that these feats really mean anything to us. But they, along with the other weapons, made the Munificent one of the most formidable warships in the Separatist fleet, despite its relatively small size compared to the others. We see small squadrons of Munificents severely damage or even destroy Republic Venator-class Star Destroyers several times throughout the Clone Wars, and a few of these would be an enormous boon to the Rebel Alliance in their fight against the Empire. And those are 5 ships I think the Rebels should have added to their fleet. There are a lot more that would have been excellent, but these are the ones I thought would be the most interesting to talk about, and with the exception of the Corona, the easiest for them to get their hands on in bulk. The Republic's Venators would have cut the war in half, but they all became Imperial Venators after the Clone Wars, and would have been a lot more closely guarded than things like the Gozanti or Nebulon B, if any still existed by the time of the Civil War at all. But let me know what you would have chosen instead. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.